Hurling a rock through the glass, the vandal carefully lifts his jacket over the window ledge, using it to protect him from any shards still in the frame. Detention? What a joke. He clambers inside the classroom, shaking tiny glass fragments off his jacket. He'd get his own back tonight. The paint supplies rattling around in his backpack will make sure of that. Unzipping the bag, he grabs 2 cans, shakes them vigorously in his hands, then makes straight for the corridor. With both arms outstretched, the vandal sprays in every direction. Streaks and splatters of red cover the walls, lockers, and coats left behind on hooks by forgetful students. He keeps running, covering more and more of the school in red. He jumps on tables, scrawling crimson doodles and obscenities about the principal on the spot students normally eat. He only stops when his dual-wielded cans start to rattle with a telltale empty shake. Throwing them back in his bag, he grabs a softball bat and a paintball mask. He places the mask on his face and starts to swing the bat wildly. He smashes at the windows and desks and kicks open bathroom doors. The toilets are stuffed with tissue paper before he hits the flush, letting the rancid water come overflowing out of them, pooling around his sneakers. As he's tearing around the place, spraying, kicking, breaking, he doesn't notice the words that have appeared on the chalkboards in all the classrooms. Please, that hurts. Why are you doing this? Almost like the school itself wants him to stop. The vandal thinks his work is done. He needs to make his exit before someone notices what he's done. But when he heads to the window he broke, he finds it's intact. Odd, he must have walked into the wrong classroom by mistake. Heading out into the corridor, he walks down towards the door to the next one, and keeps walking. It's not getting any closer. The hallway just seems to stretch on forever and ever. Or the vandal isn't moving at all and is stuck in the same place. Below his feet, the floor moves on its own beneath each step, like the belt of a treadmill. He stops, staring at the ground in confusion, but the floor keeps going, sending him hurtling back towards a wall. He slams into it with a thud, the air rushing out of his lungs. Knocked over, he falls face first, and the moving, paint and water-sodden floor carries him along. The vandal tries to stand up, but the fast-moving floor makes it impossible. Around him, the walls and the ceilings are shifting, reconfiguring like a huge Rubik's Cube. Parts of the school careen past his head as he's sent barreling through the convulsing, unwinding corridor until the floor stops moving. The sudden halt launches the vandal forward, sending him barreling towards the solid wall in front of him. A row of lockers slides into view. One of them opens and catches him with the loud crunch of bone. A different, deeper red starts spilling out from the locker as its door slams shut and locks. Sometime after December 9th, 1999, the SCP Foundation moved in to seize control over Northern Washington Elementary School near the Glacier Peak region of the Cascade Mountains. Ever since the anomalous occurrences that took place there, the building had been evacuated and functionally abandoned. Initially, the Foundation had no idea that any anomalous activity had ever occurred on site. They had requisitioned the disused school to use as a temporary containment site for an entirely separate anomaly, SCP Redacted. It wasn't until a field agent noticed something unusual and notified other Foundation staff members that these temporary containment plans had to be scrapped. However, it was after transfer procedures were already complete, leading to an increased risk to on-site personnel while an evacuation plan was being coordinated. The field agent, who asked to remain nameless in official Foundation documentation, became aware of several local police reports that detailed a number of missing persons cases. In all of these incidents, Northern Washington Elementary School was the last place the victims were seen alive. Expecting there to be a potential anomalous threat active within the area, the SCP Foundation dispatched Division 3 of Mobile Task Force Psi-7, also referred to as Home Improvement, given their penchant for neutralizing anomalous buildings. Psi-7 arrived and began assessing the area, searching for possible threats, with clearance from Foundation Command to destroy the former containment site, if necessary. The team made their way through the main entrance, checking their corners as they made sweeps of each individual administration office, which were located near the entrance in the southern sector of the school. Moving north, the team kept a tight formation, following a hallway towards a large open room that had previously served as both a cafeteria and auditorium. Smaller areas adjacent to this space, like a bathroom and a small performance and presentation stage, were scanned for anomalous activity. Psi-7 then mobilized from towards the east side of the school to check classrooms. The school itself was relatively small, just one location, with only 6 classrooms in total. Sweeping each one thoroughly for any signs of anomalous activity only took a few minutes, but some of the operatives of home improvement seemed on edge. More than one reported spotting movement on the walls or the tiles on the floors and ceilings. Their commanding officer brushed them off as tricks of the light from the flashlight and laser sight attachments on each operative's assault rifle. As far as they could see, there was nothing out of the ordinary. The team discovered the room that the Foundation had previously used as a containment area, now decommissioned and sealed behind a brick wall. Placing a demolition charge against the wall, a controlled blast tore the brickwork apart. Psi-7 team breached the room, filing in with their weapons trained on the containment tent. There was something inside, the light cast by their attachments revealing a shadowy mass behind the thin material. Moving up, the commander took point, lifting the containment tent flap with the barrel of his gun, only for the beam of his flashlight to flicker over a pile of bodies. There were 7 of them, laying inside the tent, motionless. Closer inspection from the MTF operatives revealed that each one matched a description found in the missing persons reports. They had found the people who'd gone missing at Northern Washington Elementary School. Also recovered within the tent was a small black sphere, initially thought to be an anomalous object of some description. But as the commander got a closer look at it, he realized it was a plastic toy, a rare one, but one that he and his sergeant recognized. It was a magic 8-ball. Neither of them had seen one in years. With the location of the missing persons established, Division 3 of Psi-7 prepared to exfiltrate from the decommissioned containment site. But it was as they were doubling back the way they came that they noticed something had changed. Something that would have gone completely unnoticed if the squad commander hadn't insisted on being thorough, conducting an additional sweep of the building as home improvement were leaving. One of the squad members moved the beam of their flashlight around one of the classrooms. The light passed the room's chalkboard. On it was a message, one that hadn't been there when they'd checked the same classroom a few moments earlier. The message read, "Please don't hurt me." MTF Psi-7 were evacuated from the area as it quickly became apparent that they'd made initial contact with a previously undetected anomaly. At first, the numerous disappearances had been misattributed to SCP Redacted, the anomaly previously being contained at the abandoned school. However, it now seemed that some other entity was present within Northern Washington Elementary. A Foundation threat assessment deemed it equally as likely to have been the cause for the multiple disappearances, especially since the temporary containment of SCP Redacted had been relocated before the Psi-7 investigation. In early 2000, once the location had been fully secured, with temporary containment measures now established around the building itself, senior researcher McKnight was assigned to oversee the Foundation's efforts to figure out just what they were up against. Division 3 of Mobile Task Force Psi-7 remained on site to keep the area secured, and a detachment of their operatives guided McKnight into the classroom where the anomalous chalk message had been found. This was only after the MTF operatives seemed to have trouble finding the correct door to access the classroom. Those that were there on the night of the sweep seemed to indicate that some of the interior doors at the school had been relocated, and some even outright removed. Although this notion was dismissed as simply an illusion owing to the school looking different during daylight hours. Once inside the correct classroom, a perturbed senior researcher McKnight was able to conduct a preliminary interview with the entity within Northern Washington Elementary School. It seemed it could only communicate via chalk writing on the board, prolonging the interview process, much to McKnight's short-tempered annoyance. As McKnight wrote questions on the board, it was quickly established that the entity could read, and also that it didn't have a name. When asked why it had placed the magic 8-ball in the containment tent, the entity responded with a message in chalk that read, "It was magic, so I had to keep it safe." When senior researcher McKnight asked the entity why it had killed the 7 missing people, there was a noted period of time wherein no response was received. Then, in noticeably worse writing, the entity's reply was that it had just been trying to help. After this point, it refused to respond to any further questioning, causing an irate McKnight to prematurely terminate the interview. Still, one thing was clear. There was some kind of anomaly residing at the abandoned Northern Washington Elementary School. Immediately, research teams began spreading chatter about this being a potential encounter with a ghost. One popular rumor was that the school and its grounds were haunted by the spirit of a dead student. Even MTF Psi-7 operatives started believing the notion, as it certainly seemed to explain all the strange movements they'd thought they'd seen inside. However, none of this could be verified until the Foundation had conducted a thorough psychological evaluation of the entity, prompting Dr. Underwood, an expert in anomalous psychiatry, to be assigned to assess the entity. Once she was flown out to the site and guided into the school building, Dr. Underwood was shown to the classroom and communication procedures were explained. Then, writing on the chalkboard, she introduced herself as the entity's new psychologist. In its response, the entity seemed unaware what a psychologist was, leading Dr. Underwood to clarify that she had been assigned to make sure the entity was happy. Immediately, it expressed a preference for her approach over the blunt demeanor of senior researcher McKnight. It seemed to consider him and the MTF operatives that had been present during the preliminary interview to be an unsettling presence. It was noticeably more open to the prospect of spending more time with the anomalous psychologist instead. Dr. Underwood noted that, unlike in the responses that it had given in the previous interview, the entity's chalk-written sentences were now being ended with a grammatically correct period. Picking up on this detail, she questioned the entity over why it had started ending sentences like this. The entity responded with, "I saw you guys using it, so I am." It appeared to Dr. Underwood that this entity possessed the ability to learn and could adapt its own behavior and responses according to new information. She made arrangements for a language tutor to start teaching it to improve its written communication as soon as possible. Before the psychological evaluation concluded, the entity was asked if there was anything else on its mind. When prompted, it asked about the state of the 7 missing people that had been found dead in the containment tent. Instead of answering honestly, Dr. Underwood made the call to lie by omission, replying that they were in a safe place and that the entity needn't worry about them anymore. Over the course of subsequent sessions, Dr. Underwood was able to determine much about the entity's behavior, building a complete and comprehensive psychological profile of the anomaly. She deduced that in addition to displaying clear sentience, it possessed an intelligence level and communicative abilities at the level of a 7-year-old child of average acumen. It was additionally noted the continuing way in which the entity displayed rapid learning capabilities. This was evident through its continued lessons with a Foundation-provided language tutor. The entity's crudely written chalk messages, previously laden with misspellings and misplaced punctuation, began to improve significantly the more it was taught. Research teams also set about establishing how much of the abandoned grounds of Northern Washington Elementary the entity had influence over. Initially, given that it used the classroom chalkboard as its primary method of communication, it was first assumed that it only had limited control over one specific room, with the ability to manipulate the surrounding area to a lesser degree. However, by conducting tests wherein they attempted to communicate with the entity from the chalkboards of different rooms, researchers witnessed the chalk dust on each one being rearranged to form responses. It seemed the entity could tell which room was inhabited and in which the chalkboard was being used to talk to it. Expanding testing beyond just classrooms to the wider scope of the abandoned school, it became apparent to the Foundation's research teams of the anomalous architecture and anomalous engineering divisions that this entity wasn't just sentient, but also fully sapient too. It could tell when pressure was applied through footfalls or other tactile stimulations to different parts of the school, reacting to forces as small as 1 millinewton. In short, it could, in its own way, experience touch. The entity could also detect changes in heat levels throughout the structure too, with researchers believing this allowed it to see through an anomalous form of vision similar to the effects of thermal imaging. The school building itself seemed to act as a conduit for the limited senses that the entity possessed, allowing it to perceive activity throughout different parts of the school, more accurately, different parts of itself. It seemed that this entity wasn't an incorporeal anomaly inhabiting the empty school building, it was the school itself, a fully sentient and sapient anomalous being. Dr. Underwood continued conducting psychological consultations with the entity, monitoring its progress with greater accuracy the more its communication improved. When asked about any concerns it might have had, there was one consistent matter that the entity kept bringing up across multiple sessions. It wanted to know when it could start helping the Foundation. This request was one Dr. Underwood wasn't cleared to permit, instead forcing her to respond stating she didn't have an answer, though she encouraged the entity to continue its good work in order for the relevant approvals to be issued by Foundation higher-ups. During a regularly scheduled psychological evaluation that took place at least a decade after its initial discovery, the entity expressed itself by creating a chalk drawing depicting a smiling stick figure wearing a lab coat that was labeled as Dr. Underwood. In the simple drawing, she was standing within a large rectangle that was labeled Me. Shortly after, clearance was granted for the entity to begin the early stages of a prolonged series of basic training exercises, tailored to suit its intelligence and comprehension level. Since it had requested permission to assist the Foundation, Dr. Underwood had secured the appropriate clearance to allow this to occur. The entity seemed to engage with its training with a mix of trepidation and excitement. Dr. Underwood encouraged it, with gentle reminders that they were only providing tests that would help prepare the entity for the real work of one day helping the Foundation. At least, that's what she was allowed to say. The Foundation had, by this time, established Site 211 around the anomalous school, with the building itself referred to as Unit 1 of this facility. To the public, they ran a cover story that this was to be a geological research facility. Security checkpoints were established on all roads leading to and from the area, strictly deterring any access unless authorized by the SCP Foundation. Guards were instructed to patrol the perimeter at all times, keeping watch of the entrances to the building. Foundation personnel seeking to enter the school, perform experiments involving it, or have any other interactions with the entity would require express permission from Site Director McKnight. Having secured approval from the O5 Council, Project 3970-0 was set to commence immediately. The anomalous entity, designated as SCP-3970, wasn't being given tests, but was now being used by the Foundation as an active anomalous containment site. When engaging with the anomalous building, personnel, including Dr. Underwood, were instructed to continue the pretense that it was still undergoing training procedures. In actuality, the full scope of its anomalous utility to the Foundation was being continually honed, made all the more efficient when it came to keeping other anomalies contained. Thanks to continued teaching and improvement of its communication skills, SCP-3970 developed an almost perfect photographic memory, thanks in no small part to its anomalous thermal imaging. The entity's cooperative nature and intense desire to assist the Foundation also made it an incredibly valuable and pliable asset. There were no recorded instances of it harming or intending to cause harm to Foundation personnel, not even unintentionally. The one potential speed bump in the way of its utility was that SCP-3970 expressed a significant level of anxiety over the containment of anomalous objects. This is something the Foundation was able to work around. By continuing to only provide it with limited information and controlling what they taught it, the Foundation was able to prevent SCP-3970 from being able to tell the difference between normal and anomalous properties. In short, if anomalous objects or creatures were contained there, whether they were harmless or posed potential danger, SCP-3970 would be none the wiser. They had established SCP-3970 had complete mechanical control over its structure, able to influence the placement of doors, movement of walls, floors, and ceilings, control fire suppressant systems, and even reconfigure its own internal plumbing and electrical wiring. This meant the Foundation was able to manipulate the SAPIENT building into being perfect for the role they had initially intended for it. SCP-3970 had, at one time, been Northern Washington Elementary School. Now, it was Foundation Site 211. The influence of SCP-3970 spread to external structures that were built around and added onto the original school building. The anomalous architecture and engineering teams who had been assessing the anomalous location before hadn't just been gauging its abilities, but remodeling it from an old elementary school to a fully functioning Foundation facility. Any permanent additions to the structure could be similarly controlled by SCP-3970, and it, in turn, was being controlled by the Foundation through lies of omission limiting its information and knowledge. When questioned on the morality of restricting the building's consciousness like this, the Ethics Committee was met with an eruption of laughter from Site Director McKnight. He justified the effective suppression of SCP-3970's development by pointing out that the Foundation could only communicate with the entity via chalkboards. Any attempts to install other methods of communication had failed. How were they supposed to teach it anything more, he reasoned. Site 211 would grow to cover around 30 times the dimensions of the school it was originally built out from, or Unit 1, as the Foundation called it. There appeared to be no limit to the influence of SCP-3970, able to extend its control through the entire facility, and even able to perform multiple tasks at once with ease and without any loss of efficiency. It would continue to grow and add new structures to itself, continually improving its ability to carry out containment procedures of the anomalies the Foundation chose to keep there. After all, SCP-3970 had wanted to contain too, and the Foundation made sure it did. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-026, After School Retention,